on the border in El Paso earlier this year who proclaimed that the border with Mexico was safer than it had ever been. And it is beyond me that he would make a statement like that, to be either that naive or that he has another agenda. I don't know which it is, but either way, America is ill-served. We need to put the strategic fencing in place. We need to increase substantially the number of boots on the ground in law enforcement and military. Just yesterday, and I don't know whether it was a headline in your papers or not, but they are cutting the number of National Guard troops on the border with Mexico, substantially reducing the number. I'm going to substantially increase the number of troops on that border that are involved either militarily or law enforcement-wise, and substantially increase the number of aviation assets that we have flying 24/7 in all types of weather, giving that real-time information down so that when you see, and you can identify with our technology today very easily, and to our technicians, what's going on that border. And when we see illegal activities or we suspect illegal activities, is to send fast response teams, and we can shut that border down. I have made the commitment that within 1 year of me taking my hand off the Bible when I'm sworn in as the President of the United States, the border with Mexico will be shut down. Share with you why that's so important, not just because of the issue of illegal immigration, but Mexico, we know today, is being used as a country where terrorist organizations are organizing and deploying. Hezbollah, Hamas. 60 days or so ago, we find out that the Iranians were in a conversation with the Zeta cartels to be able to put an operation into place that penetrated through the southern border of the United States to assassinate a foreign diplomat on American soil. That border has to be secure for the future security of America. You have in South America a country that is a sworn hostile enemy of the United States and Venezuela. The largest Iranian embassy in the world is in Venezuela. You have a Marxist regime in Bolivia. We have friends and allies in South America that are begging for us to engage in this hemisphere to make it safer. And this is not anything new. I mean, the Monroe Doctrine of the early 1820s was put into place to protect the Western Hemisphere from interference from foreign countries. We used it in the 60s when the Russians were putting missiles into Cuba. I will suggest to you our country's safety and security is in jeopardy again because of the porous border that we have with Mexico. We must secure that border with Mexico first and quickly.
My question is this: I think we don't want to change Washington, but we have to realize it's not a Republican problem, it's not a Democratic problem, it's a Washington problem. How is a senior environmental business in the state of Iowa and private in the state? You have they have policy interest, and we don't know anything about Iowa yet. We have projects from setting a specialized group to help Mississippi and there's an overreach of government no matter which
Absolutely.
How do you feel it?
Absolutely, you are correct. This is not a Republican or a Democrat problem. This is a Washington problem. That's the reason it's going to take an outsider, someone who has not got a history of either Washington or Wall Street, that's going to have to walk in to that. And let me just address address EPA if I may. The way that I would address the EPA is twofold. You nominate and hire individuals who are in complete philosophical agreement that the states should be where those environmental decisions are made, and the vast majority of the decisions. I would pull back every regulation that has gone forward. Bobby shared with you, 10 a day, or just it's a fountain of regulations coming out of Washington, D.C. I would pull every one of those back, audit them. I would audit them by the agency it comes from, and I would use outside third parties. Audit every regulation that's gone forward since '08, and if it kills jobs versus helps create jobs, it's gone. Cost versus benefit on every one of those regulations. Let me give you an example. How many of you are in the ag industry? Those of you, well, all of you are in the ag business because you eat. But the fact is, those directly involved with the agriculture industry, here's an EPA regulation that I was talking to a John Deere dealer, and EPA is requiring a new engine to be developed that reduces the nitrogen oxide emission, some minuscule amount. But the cost of that engine for each one of those new tractors is $20,000 more. That's the type of over-regulation, that cost versus benefit, that we've been seeing come out of Washington, D.C. under Republican and Democrat administrations. It has to stop. I mean, the Department of Labor went forward with, Bobby was talking about, the EPA, or I suppose it was the EPA, with the oil issue on the sweepers. The Labor Department was going to put a regulation in place that you had to be 18 years old before you could drive a piece of farm equipment legally. Now, how's that going to go over in Iowa or Texas or any other state that has agriculture? That's the out of touch bureaucratic mess that we find ourselves in this country. So having men and women who will come in and clearly understand the direction we're going, and pulling those regulations in, giving clear instructions. But listen, we're not going to be driven by some radical environmental agenda. And this president that we have today is that pipeline from Canada to the United States. The reason it hasn't begun already is because he has a base on his political left, his pressure. And he is allowing them to keep jobs from being created in America. The building of that pipeline will create tens of thousands of jobs. And this is a pipeline that has been at least 3 years worth of study. Their pipeline's already going across the Ogallala Aquifer. It's going to be one of the safest pipelines built in history. Yet, his agenda and his political supporters' agenda is to help drive America away from fossil fuels to green sources of energy, regardless of the cost and regardless of what it does for America's energy future from a security standpoint. Chinese oil or U.S. oil is the issue. Notwithstanding the jobs that are created, this president, in my opinion, is putting America's future in jeopardy, both from an economic standpoint and from a foreign policy standpoint, because he's more interested in winning the next election than he is you having a secure future economically or otherwise. Yes, sir.
Where is this part that you got at?
God had never left. He's still available.
As far as I feel like our next kind of
high schoolers in here? All right, a few back in the back there. Those of you that have just graduated from high school a few years back. That graduation is one of the biggest days of your life to that day. It certainly was for me. And the idea that a federal judge, federal court, tells you when, where, or how you can pray seems so out of whack. And in 1962, that court ruled that we had to separate, the church and the state. And I understand that. But the Constitution said we were going to have freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. I think it's time to have a President of the United States that will stand up and say, listen, I'm not afraid to admit I'm a Christian. I'm not afraid to stand up and say, Judeo-Christian values are what this country were developed upon. You go back and read our founding fathers, and somebody wants to say, oh, well, Jefferson was a deist. Well, go check out all those other founding fathers and see what they wrote about providence and God's involvement in the development of this country. And it's time for us to not be ashamed. Let's get over the political correctness of the left forcing us and forcing our schools. The idea that we have justices. We got 4 justices that are activists. They are legislators with robes on the Supreme Court. We got 4 over here that are strict constructionists. Those 8 and 1 more that makes up kind of the swing vote. And the next President of the United States may pick at least 2 and maybe 3 members of that Supreme Court. I put 6 of the 9 members of the Supreme Court on the Texas court. And our justices are elected, but there's been openings. And 6 of the 9 I've appointed. And I'm really proud that those men and women are strict constructionists. When they read that Constitution and they look to see if there's anything in there about abortion, or as they read and look at whether or not a local school should have the right to decide whether their children have a prayer during school, I'll suggest to you they won't find that in the Constitution, and they'll say, you know what, that needs to go back to the states for the